You can have the most beautiful micro adventure in the whole world and adore it completely, and be completely shitting your pants the entire time. And just because you either, just because you loved it doesn't mean that you weren't scared. Just because you were scared doesn't mean that you didn't love it. So I think we need to be more kind to ourselves in allowing, multiple realms of feeling to exist and multiple realms of emotion to exist alongside each other, and not have this belief that there needs to be this one singular overriding emotion that will dictate what an experience was. That it's okay to feel multiple things at one time, and that's probably what we're designed to be as human beings.
Ladies and gentlemen of the interwebs, welcome to episode 7 of Yarning with Yana. I'm back. That's right. It's only been a 3-year hiatus. Anyway, I digress. Are you crapping your dacks at the moment? Or perhaps you're not crapping your dacks and you're wondering if you should be crapping your dacks. Today on the show, I've got Eleanor, Cary, and we're going to be talking all things DAC crapping. In 2015, Eleanor rode a bicycle from one side of Europe to the other side of Europe, and is not a cyclist. 2 years ago, Eleanor jumped in a 7-meter boat with 2 women she didn't know and spent 62 days straight at sea, completely unassisted, rowing from California to Hawaii, and broke 2 world records at the same time. If you're wondering why you would do something like that, then listen up. Eleanor's going to tell us how she managed to find herself on the boat, got through the DAC crapping, and continues to just live with crapping her DACs. Listen up.
So welcome to episode 7 of Yarning with Yana, where we tell delightful human stories. And today, my delightful human who is guest on our show is Eleanor, Cary. Hi.
Well, hello. Hi, Yana. How are you? Thanks for having me here today.
Look, it's been a while since I did a Yarning with Yana, your first cab off the rank after a fairly significant hiatus. So you'll have to be gentle with me. I know you do a lot of these, so I appreciate your patience.
Well, if we're gentle with each other, I think we'll come out of it all right.
How are you, Eleanor?
Oh, just great. We're what are we getting? Maybe towards the end of an isolation period in this current time of our lives. So it's been very interesting. But no, overall, I'm great.
And tell me, just a question off the bat. Did you enjoy isolation? Is there any, people kind of they got nervous about being in isolation, what isolation meant. Do you get scared about coming out of isolation now?
So I have to say, I would have thought maybe a few years ago that I was in the extrovert category. I have recently realized that I'm so firmly far down in the introvert category. So if I'm totally honest, the isolation has been, for parts of it, perhaps blissful could be a word. Of course, acknowledging an enormous amount of privilege that I get to say that with, that I haven't really been, hugely directly affected by a lot of the effects, and we've been quite lucky in Australia as well. But I'm certainly, it will certainly be a readjustment, I think, going back into regular life. But I'm not a stranger to being in isolated environments. So it's been less confronting being in this one than some of my previous ones, which has been a slight advantage compared to some.
Right. So for our listeners, thank you. And for our listeners who don't know anything about you, I'm just going to give the brief rundown. Please interject if I've got this wrong. So in 2015, you cycled solo across Europe. And what did you say? That might make it sound like I knew what I was doing, but I didn't. So I gather you're not a cyclist.
No, I was not a cyclist. I'd done, recreational cycling. Did I know how to ride a bike? Yes, I did. Had I ever ridden a bike very far? No, I hadn't. Had never camped on my own, really didn't have any of the base level skills or prior experience that one would perhaps assume that somebody would have undertaking a journey of that length, which is why I sort of got so much pushback from people when I was starting out on it. So yeah, it was interesting to say the least.
Before I ask you questions regarding that, I just need to add probably a massive kicker, which, look, not to overshadow the ride across Europe, but with just 8 weeks notice, you jumped in a boat. How long was the boat?
About 7 meters.
a 7-meter boat with 2 other women that you did not know. And you spent 62 days straight rowing from California to Hawaii and never rowed before?
I had rowed a little in university for, for a few months. But, flat water rowing on the Brisbane River is very different to ocean rowing, almost sort of completely separate sports. So let's go with overall no.
Ever sailed a yacht before or anything?
No.
No.
Oh, maybe I'd been on a boat once or twice, but no, I grew up in, inland country, Australia. We took holidays at the beach. I thought the waves were very exciting and very mesmerizing, but I'd never really been past the breakers very, very frequently or spent any time out there until I was then forced to be on this boat for 62 whole days. So it was quite the baptism by fire. Or water, maybe we should say.
Open water's different, very different to a flat river. You just said that
Really
you were forced to be on the boat for 62 days. You weren't really. That was the choice, wasn't it? Or do you feel like, is there a part of you now that looks back on it going, did you drag yourself on that? Did you make this consciously? This decision, was it a conscious decision? Or did you drag a part of yourself kicking and screaming, going, oh, fuck, we're going to do it again?
Oh, that is such a fascinating question, because there's a part of me. So I'd known, as I sort of, had done the cycle and read a lot of adventure books and watched a lot of adventure documentaries before I went on this journey, I had some knowledge that people did this thing which was rowing oceans. And I always thought that it was the most awful, disgusting thing you could ever want to do, ever. I just did not I had no understanding why anybody could ever want to do it, even though I'd, seen some different stories. But for whatever reason, when I watched this documentary, Losing Sight of Shore, it's still on Netflix, about 4 women that they rowed the entire way across the Pacific Ocean. They were at sea for 9 months rowing. So it's, just this phenomenon of rowing for that long every single day is huge. And something changed in my body when I watched that documentary that I thought, it still looked like one of the most awful things that you could do, but I just saw this flip side to the beauty and the simplicity that they had as part of that experience. And so it was never sort of complete enjoyment or complete, pursuit of this crazy thing. And it was never sort of completely in the awful category. It was always sort of both of those things at the same time, both hating it and loving it, tracking along next to each other, neither one existing sort of totally on its own. So, did I force myself? In a way, yes, because I knew that there was a risk that maybe I wouldn't come out of it alive. I may not come out of it alive. That was definitely an understood risk going in. So I think there has to be a part of you that forces yourself into those situations when you are putting yourself purposefully in harm's way. But I knew that if we did come out of it on the other side, it would just be one of the most beautiful experiences you could possibly hope to have. So a little of column A and a little of column B.
That's fascinating. That how did your friends and family? So did you understand the risk before you signed up for this? So you basically had signed up, and then someone kind of had fallen out, and then you just got the part. You had 8 weeks to get your shit together. But did you understand the massive risk before you signed that?
I had perhaps an abstract understanding of the risk. I knew, obviously, you can't possibly be in open water totally without any risk. I knew that, that of course people have died at sea and will continue to die at sea for as long as, human beings venture out there. But I remember the moment. So yeah, there was it was a crew of 3. The third crew member, she dropped out, with this only, 8 weeks notice before we had to be out there. And, and my number came up. So I did sign up basically of this gut reaction that was like, I know that I have to go. I know that I'm meant to do this. It was this fire that sort of just started within me. It was a petrified fire, but it was still a fire. And I remember the moment. So then I had to do, in the 6 or 8 weeks before we had to be out in California, there were 6 technical courses that I had to do. So there was a day skipper sailing certificate, a certificate that I have, still don't really know how to sail, a first aid course, a VHF radio course, 3 others that I can't even remember. But the other one that was when the penny dropped about how serious the expedition was I went down to Sydney to do a sea safety survival course. And again, most of the courses are based on sailing because there are very few people that have rowed oceans. The people that have rowed oceans is about 400 in the whole world. So there aren't ocean rowing courses that exist because there's just nobody, there's not a quantity of people who need that. So they're all sailing courses. And I remember the moment that the penny dropped on this sailing course. So if you're sailing at night, and this is, on a larger vessel with a sail and with a motor as well, that if you lose somebody overboard at nighttime, the chance of recovering that person is less than 5%, that you'll be able to, see them, track them down and successfully retrieve them back onto the vessel again. And I just thought, if that is on a boat that has a motor that you can feasibly sort of turn around, the chances that if you are lost off the side of an ocean rowing boat, which you're traveling at 1 or 2 knots an hour, you're traveling with the current, you cannot turn it around. It's almost impossible. That I just knew that, that if I did get separated from the boat, or one of us got separated from the boat, you are basically guaranteed, that you're dead. And I think I cried for a couple of hours that night when that really sort of hit home. And I did ask myself a lot of those questions going, is this really, of all the things you could do, this is what you're going to choose? But I don't know, there was something there that I was willing to accept that amount of risk and this morbid and fascinating thought, which was, even if I do, meet my maker out there, I know that I've done it doing something that I was truly meant to do, and I was somehow sort of strangely at peace with that.
Can you tell me, what does that feeling feel like? I mean, I'm interested to know what this feeling feels like for different people. So, I sometimes feel like my instinct and my fear can get a little bit confused sometimes. And what does it feel like to know? What does knowing feel like?
Like knowing that I was going to do it 100%. The best way that I can describe it is it was like a fire in the depth of my stomach. Like somebody had turned on, this enormous burning furnace that just had such, it's like there was a power that had almost initiated within me that was not of my own control. Like it was very sudden, almost very, almost sort of external. And it was just like the right connections had just been made in the right circumstance at the right time with the right thing, where everything just happened to align, and it ignited like this, a bomb is the wrong word because then it's sort of gone, but it was this strong burning fire full of energy somehow. And that it stayed for a considerable time.
Did it sustain you through the road?
I'd say that fire, burnt, I guess, I think to the point that it got me in the boat. Stepping foot in the boat was one of the hardest things that I've ever done, because that was the true test and the true moment. You've gone and you've done the preparation and you've taken all the steps, and we're out there in California, but that you can still choose not to get in the boat right up until the second of, even in those first, day or two when you're out there, you could still decide to go back or whatever it might be. So that fire, it burnt, until I would say we got in the boat. And then I can't say that I felt that fire anymore, because we'd started. And it was almost that we were powered by, I felt anyway, that I was powered by necessities to survive, perhaps at that point. So the strong burn was before, and then for the first, few weeks on the boat, it was pure scrape by survival by the skin of my teeth.
So it was 62 days straight, no assistance, no stopping, nothing like that. You got really sick for the first part. How many days were you sick for? How long were you seasick for?
About 17 days worth of seasickness. So, in the first few days, it was just everything was coming up. We still were rowing the entire time. I wasn't the only one that was sick either. Everybody had some level of seasickness. And it's tough, like when you're on a 3-hour rowing shift and you're leaning over the side, vomiting every 10 or 15 minutes, and you just feel so rotten and so awful, but you have no choice but to row. In those circumstances, you can't just lie down and be like, I'm just gonna have a shift off or whatever. So I didn't miss a shift that entire time. Sometimes it wasn't particularly functional, like I'd row for 3 hours, but it certainly wasn't hugely powerful. But if that's all that you can muster at the time, then that's all you can muster. So finally, I think in those day 15, 16, 17, they told me to pretty much triple my seasickness medications. I had this patch on under my ear that is hallucinogenic. I was taking every kind of oral seasickness medication that there was. They kept reassuring me. They're like, look, once you're at sea for 3 or 5 days, it'll settle down. And it just didn't settle down.
And
so,
how did you not give up here? Like, this is give up time. Why did you not pack it in? I'm not sure. When I look back at how I was feeling, and once it got to 7 and 10 days, we really weren't, like, I wasn't able to eat. Like, I took a diary of the stuff that I'd eaten over the first 10 or 12 days, and it was something like 1,500 calories in 10 days, which would be, if you ate 1,500 calories on a normal day, that would be a lean day. So normal adults on a day-to-day basis, we burn about 2,000 calories a day. So it was just, I was getting absolutely nothing in. I got to a stage where I was having really severe kidney pain. They were asking me every day what my outputs were. My urine was like really dark brown, like, which is a sign of, distress that your body's in, and just the levels of dehydration. There was nothing coming out the other end. If that's too much information for people, I apologize, but you get to we get to going on the boat soon. It's on the list.
Excellent. But you get very up close and personal with this stuff. So I was having to report all of these things every single day, urinary output, bowel output, everything else. I decided to take these letters, and it was an idea that the rest of the crew had, that Meg and Kaz had, that if we, that we should take some letters on board with us to be able to, sustain this in those times that we were sort of feeling low, or, just for entertainment or whatever it might be. And so on the 12th day, I hadn't opened any letters up to that point. I only had about 6 with me. So I was really trying to save them for times when I sort of really needed them. But I knew when I got to day 12, I was in pain. I was crying all the time. I was literally just crying through these different rowing shifts, and absolutely scraping by, sort of second by second. And I opened this letter from a good friend of mine, Mr. Aaron Birkby. And it was just exactly what I needed at that moment, which was, it was sort of just this message of, you've chosen to be here. You've chosen to be here for a reason. Remember that you did want this before. You're ready to be here. You're ready to do this. And, and it wasn't in that moment reassurance that I'd then be able to do the entire journey. It was just enough to get me through the next, few hours or whatever it might be, which is the trick, right? When you're looking down the barrel of something that feels so awful and so insurmountable and so huge that it's completely overwhelming, all you can do is convince yourself to keep going for another 5 seconds or another 10 minutes or whatever it might be. And, and it can be, anything like a letter or a bit of food or whatever it is that can just convince you enough to keep going for a bit longer. So in those moments when it was so hard, I had never decided, I guess, completely that I would make it to the end of the journey. And of course, there's many factors that are out of your control. It was more just a moment by moment commitment that I'm like, I'm still in this for now, right here, right now, until they drag me off this boat, until we're forced off this boat, I will be here for as long as I can. And I was lucky to be able to get through it. So.
You say you're crying and you're in dire straits. How did the other ladies go with? Were they feeling a similar reactions? Had they done it before? How did they cope? It would be one thing to be very unwell, but to witness that I would imagine there would be. How did they go with that?
Yeah, so it was very like all of us, I think, have quite different personalities that were on the boat. All of us were definitely in a very functional decision-making mode. So there was definitely, empathy for my situation, and they cared for me, beautifully in those moments, and, gave me cuddles and reassurance and all sorts of things. But we also knew, we all knew and were committed to the fact that we were there because we had a job to do. And we weren't just there to sit back and be able to have the time off to recuperate properly. It's not like being on land where if you're sick, you can take a day or two off. We just weren't in the situation that we were able to do that. So even though I was sort of fairly irrational in a way, I still knew that I was there to do a job as well. So, I'm really pleased with the way that we all dealt with that situation. It definitely was confronting for all of us. It's like each of us was going through our own, different version of hell, I guess, at that time. Although Kaz may not described as hell because she genuinely enjoyed it sort of so much. So, she's a water baby though. So
had she done a row before like this?
No, none of us had rowed an ocean before. None of us had significant, sailing experience. And so this is part of the Great Pacific Race as well, right? So we weren't just randomly rowing a boat in isolation. So there were 6 crews that were supposed to start. One crew just didn't even turn up to the start line because they got scared off. One crew, they capsized. They became hypothermic and had to be rescued within the first week. Another crew, their skipper was severely seasick. And so she retired, and then the rest of the crew retired within the first week. So then there were 3 crews left. And so I guess going into this, and one of the other crews, they had like an Olympic rower and had been preparing for so long. Our crew, Megan Kaz, had been preparing for a long time as well. But I know going into it that we were the underdogs. They've got this ring-in from Australia that's only been with the crew for 6 weeks that I don't think. We were never the people that they were putting the money on to think that we were going to be the ones to survive and make it, right? So we were absolutely the underdogs, and we were inexperienced. Or no, I can't say that Megan Kaz were inexperienced. They had a lot more time to be able to prepare, but I was very inexperienced, which then I think draws the collective experience of the crew, the average collective experience of the crew down somewhat. I'll rephrase that as. So yeah, it was interesting.
Inexperience. So, how do you deal with inexperience? Did you ever feel? I don't know. Sometimes this whole credibility thing comes up for me personally. That if I don't have the experience to talk about something or to offer anything or to really do anything, and I don't feel like I have the experience behind me in order to do it, I get very nervous about doing that. Do you overcome that all the time in daily life?
Yes, I definitely struggle. I really struggle with that as well. I definitely struggled with that going into the row. And I guess if that I guess particular part of it was perhaps more clear cut than even when if I can get my words out, when I have similar feelings and experiences within my business, for example, I probably find those more difficult to overcome in terms of being experienced enough to do something compared to the row. Because the row was, they've got 3 people, one of them's dropped out, and yes, I didn't have any experience, but I was willing to get in the boat. I was keen to get in that boat. I did everything I possibly could, given the amount of time that I had to get prepared and be prepared. So you know, I took as much control as I possibly could to get prepared. And the other part of it, I was sort of, I was definitely leaning on Meg and Kaz. I was definitely leaning on our sort of support crews as well, to be able to help upskill me a bit. So I think, you know, I think it's totally fine to be inexperienced. The only way that you're going to get experienced is to go and do the thing, right? And it's more a matter of, you know, doing everything in your power that you can, given whatever time frame you have and the resources you have to get the experience that you're craving and desiring that you need, but also surrounding yourself by the right people who can help you get where you're going. You don't have to encompass every quality and every, you know, on all of the levels of experience to be able to do something. You can, and it's okay to rely on others to help you get there. But yeah, I still struggle with that frequently.
Do you think there would have been a difference between, say you decided 3 years ago you were going to do this, bro, say, and then you were like, I'm going to prepare for 3 years. I'm going to study. I'm going to train. I'm going to do all of these things that everyone, you know, I'm going out to break a fucking world record, like, because you broke 2, right? If you had have gone in with that intention and like, these are my goals, this is where I'm going, you know, you had a life coach to get there, you know, blah, blah, blah. Do you think the outcome would have been different? Do you think anything would have changed as far as how you felt in those first 17 days or how you got through?
I think that's a really interesting question. I don't think it's something that was in my character or nature that I ever would have set out to do that far in advance. Both the prospect of the, you know, the financial commitment, the time commitment, the prospect of, you know, I guess dedicating such a significant period of time to something of maybe perhaps of that nature, you know, I don't think is something that I likely would have done. Whereas the situation that this occurred in, where I only had 8 weeks, and you know, I had a business, you know, in Bundaberg at the time. I had an innovation hub that I was running there, so it had a physical location, and so for so many reasons, I just wouldn't have considered, you know, doing something like that. Something happened in having such a short lead up time that almost made it go from, if it was a 3-year commitment, it felt too much. But because it was maybe, you know, 2 months before and 2 months during, a 3 or 4 month commitment, it felt doable to me. And the financial commitment was the same, and that was really stressful. But there was something that changed that just went, the time frame is so short, you just need to make it happen now, that took so much of the overthinking out of it, which I really struggle with overthinking so much. So 3 years, it's so much time to overthink it and have it break down along the way. Whereas 2 months where you're jam-packed the entire time, that actually created the environment for success for me. So maybe I'm hearing myself now and I'm like, maybe I need to apply this more frequently in other aspects of my life.
I find it really interesting. Part of me actually wonders whether that sometimes that's where you shine. That's when you have to make it work, you make it work. Whether you had 3 months notice, 3 years notice, 8 weeks. I think when you got to make it work, you make it work. But
yeah, absolutely.
My next question about the overthinking thing. You had 62 days straight at sea. How did you go with your thoughts? I know for me, I don't even like swimming because I go under the water and I'm trapped with myself.
It's too much silence, right?
There's too much silence with myself. How did you go with your thinking?
So the road for me was split into, 62 days, it's about 9 or 10 weeks. It was split into blocks of 3 weeks for me. So the first block of 3 weeks, it was pure survival. It was just, you know, it was vomiting and rowing and just trying to get myself to eat 2 bites of food. There was no room for any other thoughts of any kind to come in there. The next 3 weeks, I describe that as it was sort of just learning to live out there a little bit more easily. It was expanding our amount of stuff that we were able to do on a day-to-day basis. I sort of like would almost describe that as the period like when you first moved out of home and you're first, you know, learning how to, you know, cook and clean and do all of these things. So they're taking a lot more time and energy of your brain compared to when you've been doing them for a long time. And then the last 3 weeks is sort of when we had all of that under control. And that's when I actually had the time and space to be able to think properly. But the thing was, it wasn't this anxiety-ridden overthinking, which is sort of what I struggle with, you know, day to day and even now. The difference was out there, I felt like, you know, if the things that we go through on a day-to-day basis, you know, if you've got a bucket of sand and every interaction you have, every phone call, every email, everything you consume on social media puts a spoon of sand into your bucket, right? You get to the end of the day and you have this giant bucket of sand plus a lot of leftover sand that has happened, you know, from the rest of your life. And no matter what, I feel like I just never had enough time normally to be able to process everything that had happened. Whereas the inputs when you're at sea are so low. So you don't have work, you don't have email, you don't have phone calls, you're not socializing, you're not going out anywhere. Your life is so simple that compared to, you know, 20 liters of sand that get put into your bucket on a day-to-day basis, all of a sudden you've only got a few spoonfuls going in every day. So I found that I was able to, out there in those last 3 weeks, it was like I'd just sit there and I was just spooning sand and just processing and filtering basically everything that had happened, you know, almost through my life, but in a beautiful way where I had the time and space to be able to do that and be allowed to do that. And I actually got to inbox zero for my brain, where I felt like it was totally clean and there was, you know, it was a version of myself that did not have a filter or a layer or an influence by anyone else or anything else. And I wish that you could put that in a pill for people that you could sort of distribute, because it's one of the most beautiful experiences of my entire life. It stuck around for a little bit when I got back to land, but inevitably the sand, you know, piles up again.
That was that was my next question was, but you came back and you sold your business.
Yeah.
How did life change when you got back?
So I knew, you know, one of the big realizations that I got to out there was that I knew that I needed to sell the business, or, you know, move it on sort of somehow. And that was something that I had been grappling with for a period of time. So just to have the clarity on that felt really good. I didn't exactly have the how and the steps of exactly how I was going to make that happen. But again, I sort of helped to get the people around me that then helped me do that. And then Kat and I, my partner and I, we moved down to Tasmania for a few months. And we went hiking and we, you know, did all sorts of things that we'd been, you know, planning to sort of go and travel and go and have some fun experiences together. But because of my business, we hadn't really sort of put some of that stuff off. So it helps you reprioritize and come back to the home truth of who do you really truly want to be and what things are really important to you in your life. So it just helps you, you know, rejig everything basically in a beautiful way. I think people need to go and have these experiences regularly though, you know, because you do lose sight of it.
That was my question, is that you just mentioned that you'd been really, I guess, grappling with the business before you left. Do you think that was part of what actually forced you to go out there? Do you think that you actually put yourself at sea for 62 days straight just so you could go and think clearly and remove yourself from the situation? Subconsciously or consciously?
Yeah, maybe, definitely more subconsciously. You know, I think that, well, I knew from the cycling trip. So the cycling trip took me about 2 months as well. It was still on the internet and there's people around, but it's still fairly sort of solitary. So I knew that that beauty and time and space was something that I would get access to out there. I didn't really know what the outcome was going to be from getting access to the time and space, but I just thought, right, just got to go and put myself in that situation, and then whatever will be basically.
Micro adventures. Tell me about micro adventures. So if you're grappling with something, you don't necessarily need to go and break a couple of world records and put yourself on a boat and have seasickness for 17 days, do you?
Well, okay, this is my view on this, right? If you ever have, or if you can create the opportunity in your life to go away for an extended period of time, I believe, you know, doing something by human power, whether it's something, you know, hiking or cycling or rowing or just something that uses your physical body in some way, I believe that it's one of the most surefire ways to sort of improve your well-being. And, you know, and I've been, you know, beautifully blessed in my life to be able to have taken two month periods to be able to do that. And if I could give the gift to other people of getting to go and take that amount of time, but obviously given so many different constraints and things, it's not always possible for people to be able to go and do that. If you can, do it. If you can get away for 2 months, amazing. If you can get away for a month, still great. If you can get away for 2 weeks, still fantastic. In my day-to-day life, the way that I like to get away, you know, during the week even, is on a micro adventure. So it's a midweek overnight adventure. So say you finish work at 5 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, you go jump in your car, you know, hike just a really short distance to a campsite, camp there for the night, wake up, see the sunrise, pack your stuff up nice and early, and then get back to your desk on a Wednesday morning for the same time you'd normally start work. And I like to go alone. So, you know, these micro adventures, they're something like I went on my first one in 2014 when I was living in the UK, and I was petrified at first. Of course, it's really scary to go and do that kind of thing.
That sounds absolutely terrifying, Eleanor.
Why, out of interest, why so terrifying? Is it rational or irrational?
I think it probably is that when I look at it a little bit closely and I can deconstruct it, I guess it's being a woman, we are told don't do things like that. You're putting yourself at risk. You're taking yourself and you're putting yourself in a risky situation. We are told not to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because
we are.
Of all these things. I don't know if they're my fears. I don't know if they're my fears or the fears that have been given to me, but yeah.
Totally. And, you know, and this is something that, people have said to me time and time again, especially with the cycling journey, because that was going through cities and towns and I was on my own, and people are going, but, you know, you're a woman, you can't go and do this journey on your own. It's too unsafe. It's too risky. You're going to get murdered, all sorts of crazy things. And I guess it's coming back to, or the place that I've sort of landed with it rather, is that, you know, of course there is some element of risk. And I kind of bring it back to driving a car. So, you know, you can be driving a car, and of course we know that there is some chance that we may have a car accident. But yet we still jump in our car every single day, knowing that risk is there and doing it anyway. So I look at the genuine, real amount of risk that you're in when you're, say, driving a car on a motorway, versus if you're in the wilderness and, you know, you think that you're going to come across somebody that's gonna hurt you. And the risk is so minuscule in that respect. You know, the biggest risk that we're posed to be injured by people is usually by the people that we know. And it's not very likely, when you look statistically, at coming across some axe-wielding murderer in the middle of the bush. So we have definitely been told these messages, but to me, the amount of risk that is involved with going out there, and it's definitely taken me some time to overcome those thoughts. I definitely struggle with those as well, but the beauty and the potential outweighs the risk. So I look at the gain rather than the gap when it comes to the micro adventures. And every single time I go on one, I still get scared, but I'm so much better for it the next day. It transforms me as a human being. And the risk to me is much smaller than we think, and it's worth it. It's not to say that it's not scary. It absolutely is scary for people, and, you know, and we do need to make it as safe for people as we can. But I do think a lot of it is this internalized messaging, just like you spoke about, that I think the risk has been blown far out of proportion compared to what it really is.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
I guess,
so
I guess there's a lot of, I guess we just see so much victim blaming in the world as well. It's like, well, why did you do that? And then I guess it really holds us. It just holds us back, doesn't it?
It does. And, you know, yeah, you are exactly right when it comes to the victim blaming. And, you know, and so who's winning here? You know, if we're not going out and we're not doing things, you know, we're not gaining anything by doing that. We're missing out on such a vast array of experiences. And, you know, and of course there are awful people in the world that do awful things. And, you know, you can't guarantee that you're not going to come across one of those. But, you know, I just, it makes me mad and frustrated to think there are so many people that are missing out on experiences, and that these bad, awful people just get to walk through the world, you know, happily and owning it and doing whatever they want. It's almost like, you know, going out there to me is reclaiming something that we're entitled to as women, I think.
I have a hill up the back of my house, and I don't run it anymore. A terrible thing happened in Cairns here a couple of years ago, and I used to run that hill daily. Loved it, and it was this beauty. Oh, and I'd put music on, and I'd know which track, you know, on the same. I'd have the same album on, you know, which track I'd be at each song, and it was just this beautiful. And at the top, you get to this lookout, and it says beautiful lookout, and then I'd walk my way back down again, and I loved it. And I stopped doing it. I tried. I've tried 3 times. The first 2 times, I just got to the first bend and just absolutely shit myself. Went back to the car. I did the 3rd time. I was successful. Got up there and back, and I was like, yeah. And then I tried to do it again not long ago, and I just couldn't do it. And I need to put that into perspective.
Yeah, but it's also to say, you know, that you know, if there's a terrible thing that has genuinely happened out there, you know, the fear is real. So as well in this narrative, I guess, that I'm putting out there, that it's like, you know, go out and do the things anyway. The fear is real. So it's not to minimize that. And I think for every single one of us, and, you know, so I've been going on these micro adventures and practicing this and practicing overcoming that particular component of it since 2014. So it's been 6 years. So it's not expecting it to happen, you know, overnight. It's going to be different for every single person based on our own experiences, the things that have happened, you know, in our town, in our surrounding community, things that have happened to our friends and family. So any of those things are real. I think it's coming back to, you know, if that's really something that you want, is to go back to running that track and getting to that lookout, is partially taking a bit of the pressure off. And, you know, and if you do get to the first bend and shit yourself, you've still achieved something monumental just by getting to that point. So not to you know, minimize your own effort even in those circumstances, because that is still an enormous and huge achievement. So to give ourselves credit where credit is due, and if the next time you go, you only get another 2 meters down the track, I would still celebrate that in equal measure, that is a monumental achievement. And if that is the way that we make progress and reclaim, you know, whatever it is that we want to reclaim, then that's the way that we have to do it. I wish that there was a faster cure than that. And I wish that we could just rid the world of awful people who do awful things. But, you know, unfortunately, we don't quite have the power of a magic wand.
And now that you've reclaimed that and the fear isn't so big, tell me how that feels. Please tell me how it feels.
So it's, there's certainly a freedom in it. The fear, I would say, it still never goes away completely. Like, I do think, you know, that the media and the horror movies, they absolutely have an effect on our brains. So the thoughts still sort of pop up. I guess it's similar to that track before that I described with the road, that it was sort of really beautiful but really awful at the same time. That experiences can be both, you know, they can sit in 2 realms. An experience doesn't have to be entirely negative or entirely positive. You can have the most beautiful micro adventure in the whole world and adore it completely, and be completely shitting your pants the entire time. And just because you either, you know, just because you loved it doesn't mean that you weren't scared. Just because you were scared doesn't mean that you didn't love it. So I think we need to be more kind to ourselves in allowing, you know, multiple realms of feeling to exist and multiple realms of emotion to exist alongside each other, and not have this belief that there needs to be this one singular overriding emotion that will dictate what an experience was. That it's okay to feel multiple things at one time, and that's probably what we're designed to be as human beings. I do feel free, though, to know that I can have that fear run alongside me and step out and go and camp alone anyway. And that's the bit of it I think that I love the most, is that freedom.
The freedom to choose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
how would,
and even with,
sorry, carry on.
I was just going to say with the, going back to the conquering of the hill situation as well, it was a similar mindset that I went into the cycle trip with. I got on a one-way flight. It was from London to Norway. The plan was to cycle the whole way back to England, but I had no idea if I was going to be able to do it. The way that I had set up defining what success looked like in that environment before I left, I thought, right, if I get to Norway and if I cycle for 1 or 2 days, if I absolutely hate it and it's just awful and I decide that I don't want to go any further, I'll be really proud of myself for finding that out. And I know that when I'm 90 and in a nursing home, I know that I will look back on this moment and go, I am so glad that I got on that one-way flight to Norway and that I cycled for 2 days and then I decided and I knew that it wasn't for me. Because at least if you never try, you don't know what's going to sit on the other side of it. And I had made complete peace with that, I guess, before I got there. Or even if I got 7 days down the road, that's 7 more days of cycling and 7 days worth of distance than I had ever done before in my entire life. And that is a huge achievement. And it was only by, going out there and trying every single day that it was just so happened that I was able to stack many days on top of each other that then added up to that entire journey. So on day 1, I wasn't capable of cycling the whole way across Europe. It was only becoming that very slowly every single day. So it's not this all or nothing thing that often sort of gets described, I think.
A little bit. It's a little bits that add up.
It's just tiny. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to have to wrap it up soon. I can talk to you all day.
Me too.
You've written a book.
I have.
What else? You're doing micro adventures. Tell us about your micro adventures and how we can tap into liberating ourselves from the internal bloody restrictions that we've put on ourselves.
Yeah, and that's definitely the part of it that I'm working on. So I'm actually doing a course in positive psychology at the moment because, ultimately the foundation of micro adventures and what that instills in people is an improved sense of well-being and an improved sort of psychological fitness. It's just expressed through adventure, but the ability to sort of overcome these things. So I'm still doing some additional work at the moment in figuring out how do we really help people to overcome that fear? How do we help people feel safe in that environment? And really, it's like really installing that strong sense of improved well-being through these experiences. So through, coronavirus and different things, it's actually given me the time to be able to go back and relook at some of those components. Also, right now, at the date that we're recording this anyway, camping is still not allowed. So I'm sort of waiting to figure out exactly when the true launch is going to happen. But the main model at the moment is for businesses, sort of medium to large size businesses, to be able to send core teams of their executives or management out on these micro adventures. So doing a program for 3 months, consisting of the 3 micro adventures with training involved as well. And then being able to, really significantly improve the well-being of that workplace through that experience for people. So the business is called Voxer, VOKSER.
VOKSER. We'll put some links in there. And I could imagine that helping your team members live with fear, not overcome it because it's always going to be there, could be quite. What would be the benefits of that in a organisation? Sorry, I'm asking more questions. We're going to wrap this up.
No,
we're not.
That's okay. No, ask away. So one of the ways in which, so in terms of why do we want to impact people in this particular way, in terms of our lives, if we're only focusing on fixing the negative things, right? You're only ever going to be able to get people back to a neutral state. And absolutely, there are negative things that we need to deal with. If there's been trauma, if there's been all sorts of things, that 100% needs to be dealt with. But it's like if you want to create the most flourishing garden, and if that's for individuals or organizations, it's fairly similar in a way. If you only focus on weeding the garden and you never actually plant any beautiful plants that are going to grow up into this beautiful garden, you're going to end up with a blank patch of soil, right? So the way that the micro adventures work is it's basically helping to plant some of those seeds that are going to be able to grow up into these beautiful plants. And one of the main ways, or in terms of like how do we measure well-being, so it's the acronym PERMA. So positive emotion, engagement, so engagement or flow, meaning, relationships, and accomplishment and achievement. And basically the way that each of us relate to those 5 elements is different. So the weight that I place on relationships versus the weight that you place weight on relationships may be different. So there's no right or wrong across that spectrum of 5. But I know that Micro Adventures has the ability to boost your levels in at least 4 of those domains. And so there's going to be some research on this down the track. I don't know exactly when that's going to happen, but I really hope that we're going to be able to prove a permanent boost in people's well-being through having these experiences, because it does help you bring meaning to your life. Having the space and time to be able to think helps you improve your relationships. When you're, hiking, when you're out in nature, you're fully engaged and you're in flow. It brings you an influx of positive emotions. And I just am so excited to be able to bring that experience to people in a way that they can engage with it in their day-to-day lives, where you don't have to take extra additional time out to be able to go and have these experiences. You can work a full week and have this experience as well.
Fascinating. And I could imagine the accomplishment experience at the end would be.
Absolutely.
I still, to me, am like, oh my God, I find it terrifying. But that is something that I can definitely work on. But I guess once it's over and you can look back on it, like rowing, like riding your bike across Europe, that sense of achievement.
Yeah, the fact that you have gone and you have done that. And the fact that it is something that's scary, it's not something that's totally easy to do. It is a mountain, a literal mountain to climb, both physical and, psychologically. And when you've been able to do that, it is such a boost. And then having built those experiences, so it's building resilience as well, right? Once you have those experiences in your past, and this is something that I feel so lucky to have experienced again, and it's why I want to share it with other people, is that through, cycling across Europe, through rowing, through Micro Adventures, I am confident now that I can put myself into almost any situation and that I'll be able to cope and adapt. I might be crying, I might be completely afraid, I might not be totally sure, but I know that I have the ability to cope and the ability to adapt because I've been through that situation so many times before. And I think having that sense does help you walk around the world a little bit easier and just be with yourself a little bit more easily as well. So the huge accomplishment, huge achievement. Imagine how you would feel when you'd done that.
Great stories as well. I love spinning a yarn, yarning with Yana. I love telling stories as well. So to be able to just spin those sorts of yarns and share that sort of stuff. So you do speaking as well. You do share these experiences with what, schools?
Yeah, schools, businesses. So mainly sort of talking about resilience, high performance, decision making. And then most recently over the last couple of months, I've been delivering talks about how to be able to survive and thrive in environments of isolation, which came as a surprise to me that was relevant presently.
Like, yeah, this is my time to shine.
Weirdly, it's been a weird world.
No, it is. It's interesting. You adapt. You push through it, don't you? You adapt and keep going. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up now. Thank you very much for coming on to Yarning with Yana. Lovely to see your face, and I will share all of your links at the bottom. And I'd love to keep talking to you about how to overcome my internal body conditioning so I can get up that hill.
Totally. You will get up that hill. Don't you worry. Thank you so much for having me to spin some yarns with you. I've had an absolute ball.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.